We don't have a board, so we can't, do that.
Action.
I'm here today with Maaria Kader, and we're going to be talking about how her work can influence photographers and how she labors and slaves over the detail, the fine, extraordinary detail of her work. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce you. Say hello to our TWIP community.
Hello.
And IEPPV.
My name is Maaria Kader, and I'm happy to be here with Peter today.
So how did you get started in doing this kind of artwork?
When I was a teenager, I had seen some scratch boards. They used to have little kits in the store with pre-printed etchings that you could just take a toothpick and scratch off the surface. And then I just did a few, since I was a teenager till about, I'd say 15 years ago, just real basic pieces.
Okay. And at the time, did you know anybody else that was doing this kind of artwork?
Nope, nobody. I just thought it was a little craft or a hobby to do. So
then how does you progress from that to where you are here at the Festival of Arts in Laguna Beach as a exhibiting artist and being here a few years and a few times and selling your artwork? How did you get from being a teenager to this?
About, I'd say 8 years ago, I saw an advertisement for a solo show for a scratchboard artist, and I was like, oh my God, there is such a thing as a scratchboard artist. And I was like, I have to go to this, and luckily it was in Orange County, and it was a lady called Heather Lara. So I went to this show, and she had the most beautiful scratchboard pieces, and she had added color, which I had never seen in scratchboard before. And I think after the exhibition closed, I spent a couple of hours just eating her brain and asking her so many questions. And then finally she's like, well, why don't you try and jury into the International Society of Scratchboard Artists? So I was like, I didn't know there was such a thing either. So I got juried into that, and I haven't looked back since.
Oh, no. I mean, it's great. And I look at your work and I'm just impressed about the time that it takes you to do it and the extraordinary attention to detail. And in our photography world, attention to detail is everything, because, you have to get rid of the little dust spots and halos and artifacts and so on. But how do you know the difference between a good scratchboard and a not so good one?
I think it's just like over the years, I have learned to look at the details, not just with, my eyes without wearing my glasses, but under a magnification lens, and you can actually see the quality of the scratches. Especially when I go to scratchboard exhibitions, I can see the newer artists who have worked a lot.
Excuse me.
Worked a lot faster, and the detailed pieces that have been done by master scratchboard artists, you can actually see all the layers of the cross-hatching and the direction of the little lines.
So how old is this craft? I mean,
I think it started in the 1950s, if I'm not mistaken. In England, they used to use it just for black and white illustration.
Okay, and you're saying there's an association that you belong to, and there's a group of like-minded people to get together. Now, when people see your artwork, do they really understand what they're looking at?
No. A lot of people walk by my booth and they'll be like, oh, that's photography, or that's just like a print or an etching. And I like for them to even try it. Sometimes I'll keep a little board out and my blades, and I'll tell them to go ahead and try it.
So when you do a piece, do you actually selling the scratchboard piece or the printed piece from the scratchboard?
The actual original scratchboard piece.
So it's the original, and
yes.
Say a piece that with the animal that's behind us, it's a monkey.
Orangutan.
Orangutan,
yes.
Close. Anyway, how long did that take you actually to do?
That was about 350 hours.
Wow, 350 hours.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to price something like that. In the photography world, it's a little bit different because it's the subject matter and also the content and so on, and the name of the artist. So how do you price something that you've worked 350 hours on?
You know, it's very difficult. Sometimes I do count out my hours and it's still less than minimum wage, but I kind of go by the size of the piece of artwork as well.
Okay.
In the whole composition, there's a lot of empty space sometimes in a piece.
Yep. So, I mean, I've asked a lot of artists, how do they deal with criticism? How do you deal when somebody comes up and does not understand what the time and effort and dedication and skill has gone into it? And how do you handle that? I mean, what do you say to them, or what do you say to yourself after that?
In my head, I find it kind of amusing. Sometimes I get people who will walk by and say, oh, I could do that. I did that when I was in school. And they ask me a lot of questions. And I always tell people that I teach. I teach one-on-one. I teach workshops. I teach children. I teach adults. Because there are people who are honestly interested in learning the art of scratchboard. And unfortunately, there's no school that you can go to learn how to do scratchboard.
And my experience also in photography and other art mediums is, if it looks simple, people just assume that it's easy to do. And in a lot of cases, if it looks simple, it is very complicated and difficult to do. So what do you suggest for artists to think about if they wanted to get into doing what you do?
I would suggest they try a lot of sketching, a lot of using white pen on black paper, because especially when I use the black ink scratchboards, your brain has to think almost like a negative. You have to leave the black that you want showing and work around and just remove the areas, which will be eventually white. So your brain does have to think a little bit differently.
So who would you consider to be the master of scratchboard that's still alive today?
There is a Canadian artist. Her name is Laurie Dunn. She used to be a zoologist, and she has the most amazing pieces. And she is a purist. She does not work in color, only with black and white scratchboard. But her lines are just beautiful and soft and delicate.
And being a zoologist, obviously being close to the animals and so on. So typically, do you do people, or is it basically just animals?
I do people too. I like to do portraits as well.
Okay, okay. So if people wanted to get in touch with you and either talk or find out how to get in or do more work, how would they get in touch with you?
They would find me by email at maariakader@gmail.com, or they could go to my Facebook page or find me on Instagram under Art by Maaria Kader. And I also teach at a art studio in Laguna Niguel called Art Time. So, and right here for the whole summer.
And you're the only person doing scratchboard here at the Festival of Arts?
Yes.
And you're the only person that I've ever met that does scratchboard. I've never met anybody. So there's not a lot of people really that do what you want to do.
There's not a lot of people. It is growing, and part of being a member of the International Society of Scratchboard Artists, we really want to teach people and spread the word of scratchboard so that it gets accepted as a fine art medium. And that's why hats off to the Festival of Arts, because when I got accepted 5 years ago, they actually put scratchboard under a separate heading for all the categories.
And I guess it's a educational thing, how to educate people to your form and medium of art. I mean, most people would not understand what is involved.
True.
Right, okay.
True.
So, how long have you got? You good? Okay. So, we'll show you a short clip of how you can look at the detail, which will be in this video. And I'd like to thank Maaria for being a gracious host to show us how scratchboard, that we had no idea what it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So the material of scratchboard, the back is masonite, and there is a thin layer of white kaolin clay applied on the masonite board, and it's coated in black Indian ink. So I start out with a black surface. My tools that I use surgical scalpels, I use X-Acto blades, and various different tattoo needles. And I start off doing very, very fine lines that you can almost barely see with very, very little pressure. I'm not digging into the board, I'm just removing the black ink from the surface. And I will build up all the layers to the whitest last.